I had just shut off the engine, the smell of gasoline and oil still lingering on my hands and sleeves after a long day at the shop. With a single click of the remote, the garage door began to rise, revealing my pride and joy. The machine I had spent nearly 2 years transforming from a pile of rusted metal into a perfect work of art. Sunlight streamed in, glinting off the chrome trim and the deep, lustrous paint that seemed to swallow light like a black hole dot. Then suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the quiet. "That man just stole my car. Call 911 now." It was my neighbor and HOA president, Beverly Lang. She came charging across the lawn, phone pressed to her ear, spewing accusations while I stood on my driveway, keys still in hand. Within minutes, the sound of police sirens echoed from the end of the street. I was about to be treated like a thief. For my own property, my name is Ethan Miller, and I'm 32 years old. 6 months ago, I quit my job as an aerospace engineer to open a classic car restoration shop right here in my garage. The centerpiece of my work was a 1968 Shelby GT500 Eleanor. The car I inherited from my father, a street racing mechanic who passed away when I was 15. He'd started restoring this beauty, but never got to finish it. For me, completing this car wasn't just about horsepower or chrome. It was about finishing his dream, connecting with him through every bolt I tightened and every panel I straightened. Lang was the kind of woman who made Iswas infamous at 45. She wore a perfectly maintained blonde bob and carried her phone like it was a divine weapon. As both HOA president and a luxury car broker, she had appointed herself the neighborhood's unofficial quality control officer. Her hobbies included measuring grass with a ruler and making my life miserable over what she called commercial activity in a residential zone. And every time I started Shelby's engine, she somehow appeared, clipboard in hand, eyes blazing. "Officers, thank God you're here." Beverly practically threw herself at the first cop who stepped out of his cruiser. She waved what looked like an official document, her voice at that shrill frequency that could crack glass. "This man has stolen my car. I have the paperwork right here, the bill of sale from my client in Nevada. That's a 1968 Shelby GT500. Her eyes burned with hunger, not concern. She rattled off my car's specifications with unnerving accuracy, the kind of details only someone who'd studied it closely or been fed insider information could know. Officer Rodriguez, a stocky man with tired eyes, approached me with the weary look of someone used to suburban drama. "Sir, do you mind showing us the documentation for this vehicle?" His partner was already photographing the Shelby while Beverly narrated every detail. I calmly handed over my registration, title, and insurance. All in my name, all at this address, but Beverly was ready. She produced what she claimed was a bill of sale, showing she had sold this exact car to a Robert Mitchell in Las Vegas for $75,000. Just last week, Rodriguez frowned. "Mr. Miller, this is unusual. Her documents show she sold the car, but yours show continuous ownership. Can you prove this vehicle has been in your possession for some time?" I smiled. If Beverly wanted a fight, I was prepared. What she didn't know was that my father had been paranoid about car theft back in his racing days. This Shelby had more secrets than she could imagine. "Officer, I have progress photos, restoration videos, and a complete build log going back 22 months. But more importantly, when the officer lifted the hood, there it was. D. Miller, 1995, etched into the engine block in my father's careful hand, along with our old address. Beverly's face drained of color. She tried to recover. "Well, perhaps there's been some confusion," but her voice wavered. Rodriguez closed his notepad, clearly unconvinced. "Ma'am, I think we need to see additional documentation about this alleged sale. Mr. Miller, we may need further verification, but for now, this appears to be your vehicle." Beverly's face flushed crimson. Her plan had collapsed in front of everyone. And as she fumbled with her phone, trying to call whoever had helped her fabricate those papers, I noticed something chilling. She had known too much about the car, about me, even about the engine modifications I'd made privately in my garage. And when I remembered the drone hovering above the tree line earlier, I realized Beverly wasn't just a nosy HOA president. Something much bigger was going on. I had just shut off the engine, the smell of gasoline and oil still clinging to my hands like stubborn perfume from a bad cologne counter. 2 years of blood, sweat, and late-night takeout had all led up to this one click. The remote in my palm hummed, the garage door groaned, and slowly my creation emerged into the light like some mechanical phoenix rising from its ashes. My Shelby GT500 Eleanor, my masterpiece. It wasn't just metal and paint. It was my father's unfinished dream. The car he'd started restoring before he passed when I was 15. Every bolt I turned was like having a conversation with him across time. The chrome trim winked back at me, the black paint so deep it felt like it could swallow the sun whole. I should have been basking in that moment, the quiet pride of a son, finishing what his father started. Instead, the soundtrack was a banshee, scream cutting through the afternoon. That man just stole my car. Call 911 right now. I froze, still standing on my driveway, keys dangling from my fingers. Across the lawn came Beverly Lang, my neighbor, my personal tormentor. And the reigning queen of the HOA, Beverly wasn't just a neighbor, she was a lifestyle hazard, 45 years old, blonde bob trimmed sharper than a samurai sword, and a phone permanently fused to her hand. She stormed toward me like a prosecutor on a courtroom drama binge. Her voice could have peeled the paint right off Eleanor. "Officers, this man has my car," she shrieked, except there weren't any officers yet. Just me, my garage, and a suddenly forming peanut gallery of curious neighbors peeking through curtains and over fences. Now let me explain something about Beverly. She lived for drama like TikTok, lives for dances nobody asked for. She measured people's lawns with a ruler, sent out violation letters for trash cans left out 2 minutes too long, and had been trying to shut down my garage restoration shop since day one. In her mind, residential meant Stepford suburbia, not grease-stained hands and engine roars at midnight. But this was a new level of unhinged. She pointed at Eleanor like she'd spotted a stolen crown jewel. Her eyes burned with a kind of hunger you don't see in normal people. "That's my client's car. He just bought it. I have the paperwork," she screeched, phone clutched to her ear. The irony hit me like a bad sitcom laugh track. Here I was, standing in front of my house, holding my keys, and apparently I'd just stolen my own car. That's HOA logic for you, somewhere between Kafka and a bad reality show. And then, because the universe clearly thought my life needed a bigger twist, the faint wail of police sirens floated from down the street. Yep, Beverly had gone full Karen nuclear, called 911. On me while I was still smelling like motor oil and nostalgia. I could see the headlines already. "Local man arrested for grand theft auto in his own driveway. Rockstar Games would have owed me royalties." My stomach tightened as the sirens grew louder. Neighbors gathered like pigeons at a bread festival, whispering, pointing, pulling out phones to record. Because why just help when you can go viral on? Next door, Beverly paced in front of the car like a guard dog on espresso, one hand waving imaginary documents, the other clutching her phone like it was Excalibur. "This man stole my Shelby GT500. She shouted again, like the louder she got, the truer it became. I wanted to laugh, I really did. But when you hear sirens coming for you, and you know the cops are about to roll up with Beverly as their self-appointed star witness, humor dries up quick. Instead, I just stood there, keys still in my hand, staring at the car that was supposed to be my victory and now looked like Exhibit A in a crime I didn't commit. So there I was, 32 years old, former aerospace engineer turned classic car restorer, about to get treated like a car thief on my own driveway. And all because the HOA president from hell decided today was the day she wanted to play. Fast and Furious, Suburban Edition. And if you think it couldn't get worse, well, wait until the cops actually showed up. Asterisk, the sirens grew louder. That unmistakable Doppler effect of your day is about to get way more complicated. By the time the cruiser turned onto our street, the whole neighborhood was already tuned in, like it was the season finale of their favorite trashy reality show. Curtains twitched, phones appeared, and kids on bikes stopped mid-wheelie just to get a better look. Nothing gets suburban blood pumping like the promise of a scandal. Beverly positioned herself in the middle of my driveway, like she was directing a Broadway show. The moment the first cop's foot hit the pavement, she launched into her performance. "Officers, thank God you're here. This man stole my car." She practically shoved a stack of papers into the poor guy's chest, before he even had time to blink. Now, here's the thing about Beverly. She didn't just yell accusations, she delivered them with Oscar-worthy conviction. Her blonde bob swung dramatically as she waved what she claimed was a bill of sale. Look right here. My client in Nevada purchased this Shelby GT500 just last week. I have the signed documents. He wired me the money. I wanted to roll my eyes so hard they'd do a full 360, but instead, I just stood there, hands out, keys dangling like the world's dumbest smoking gun. My car gleamed behind me, shining under the afternoon sun, like it had no idea it had just been drafted into a courtroom drama. The Cop Rodriguez, according to the name stitched on his uniform, looked at Beverly, then at me. He had the tired expression of a man who'd seen way too many neighborhood disputes over recycling bins and barking dogs. His partner, a taller officer with a camera, was already circling Eleanor like it was part of a crime scene on CSI, HOA edition. "Ma'am, slow down," Rodriguez said, holding up his hand, but Beverly was already on round two. "It's a '68 Shelby GT500, candy apple black, custom chrome trim, 4-speed manual, with a 428 Cobra jet engine. My client paid $75,000. This thief, was trying to drive it off just now. I had to admit, she was disturbingly accurate down to the gear ratio. Stuff even most car guys wouldn't rattle off that quickly. She knew my car's specs like she'd been studying for a pop quiz, and that made my stomach twist. Rodriguez finally turned to me. "Sir, do you have any documentation proving ownership of this vehicle?" I nodded, maybe a little too quickly, and reached into my pocket for my wallet. "Absolutely. Registration, insurance, titulu, name it. All in my name, all at this address." Beverly snorted, loud and sharp, like some villain in a Disney movie. "Don't believe him. That's forged paperwork. I have the real bill of sale. My client sent me the wire transfer. This man is trying to defraud us." I swear. The way she spat out this man, you'd think I'd been caught sneaking into the Louvre at midnight with a ski mask. Rodriguez took my documents carefully, scanning them with the same neutral look doctors use when they say, "interesting," before ordering 12 more tests. "All right, Mr. Miller, these look official. But this is unusual. She has documents, too, claiming she sold this car." Of course she did. Beverly wouldn't come half-cocked to a fight. She thrived on paperwork, bylaws, and obscure legal jargon you'd only find on page 73 of a homeowner's manual. Behind us. The crowd had grown. Neighbors whispered, some openly filming. Beverly tilted her chin higher, like she was performing for them, too. For her, this wasn't just about the caret, it was about winning, about being right, about proving once and for all that she was queen of this cul-de-sac kingdom. Rodriguez looked back at me. "Mr. Miller, can you provide additional proof? Something that shows you've owned this vehicle for more than just a few weeks?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Officer, I've got everything. Build logs, photos, videos, 22 months of restoration work, but more than that." I glanced back at Eleanor, at the hood hiding my father's old engraving. "This car has a story only I can tell, and I can prove it." Beverly stiffened, lips pressed into a line. For the first time since the sirens arrived, she looked less like a confident queen and more like someone realizing the chess game was slipping out of her hands and me. I was just warming up. Rodriguez held my papers like they were radioactive, flipping through the title, the registration, and the insurance card. All clean, all mine. He even compared the VIN number on the documents to the plate visible through Eleanor's windshield. It matched, of course. Still, his brow furrowed like he was stuck in the middle of one of those logic puzzles with the farmers, the goats, and the boats. Before I could exhale, Beverly swooped in again, the human equivalent of a wasp nest. "Don't be fooled, officer. I have the real paperwork. My client wired me $75,000 for this exact car. Here's the bill of sale, signed, dated, stamped." She flourished the document like she was presenting evidence on Judge Judy. I leaned sideways and caught a glimpse. Sure enough, it looked official. A neat invoice, all the right legal jargon, and a signature that belonged to a Robert Mitchell from Las Vegas. The thing is, forgery these days doesn't look like crayon on lined paper. It looks like a PDF printed, at Staples, clean fonts, crisp logos. Enough to give an officer pause. Rodriguez shifted his weight. glanced between us, and let out a sigh that sounded like it belonged in a coffee commercial. This is unusual. On one hand, I've got documents showing Mr. Miller's owned this car for years. On the other hand, Mrs. Lang has a bill of sale, claiming she sold it last week. Can either of you provide proof beyond paperwork? That was the moment my father's voice crept back into my head. He was a man who loved two things: racing and paranoia. Back in the day, he used to say, if someone wants your car bad enough, they'll try to take it. So make sure they can't. At the time, I thought he was just being dramatic. Now, standing in my driveway with Beverly, shrieking about her Shelby, and two cops trying to referee. It didn't feel so dramatic anymore. I rubbed the grease, still lingering on my knuckles, and smiled, though it came out more like a challenge than reassurance. Officer, I've got more than papers. I've got proof this car has been in my family since before Beverly ever dreamed of scamming a Nevada client. Beverly hissed like a deflating tire. He's bluffing. Rodriguez ignored her. What kind of proof? Build logs, videos, photos. 22 months of work, every stage documented. But more importantly, there's something under the hood my dad left. Something that can't be faked. That got everyone's attention. Even Beverly stopped mid-screech, her eyes flicking toward Eleanor's, who'd like it might suddenly give away her lie. It was then I noticed it. Out of the corner of my eye, above the tree line at the back of my property, a small shape hovered. A drone, not one of those toy ones kids fly into walls for fun. This one looked steady, deliberate, like it belonged to someone who knew what they were doing. I frowned, following its path. It stayed in place, watching, recording. Nobody in this neighborhood was a tech hobbyist, not unless you counted Mr. Gutierrez's obsession with his smart lawn sprinklers. Yet here was a drone, hanging around like a silent witness. And when I glanced back at Beverly, she quickly looked away, her lips twitching like she'd been caught staring at something she shouldn't. That sent a shiver down my spine. Beverly wasn't just improvising this scam on a Tuesday afternoon. She'd done research. She'd studied Eleanor's specs with freakish accuracy, and now there was a drone in the sky. This wasn't just HOA pettiness anymore. It was starting to smell like something bigger. Rodriguez cleared his throat, dragging me back. Mr. Miller, can we see this proof under the hood? I nodded, walking over to Eleanor with a calm I didn't quite feel. My father's engraving was waiting, my ace in the hole. But as I grabbed the hood latch, my eyes flicked back once more. To the tree line, the drone was still there, its tiny camera staring down like an unblinking eye. In that moment, paranoia didn't feel like paranoia anymore. It felt like reality. And Beverly Langwin of the HOA wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was a piece in a game I didn't yet understand. Asterisk Rodriguez gave me the nod, the kind that said, "All right, show me something solid, or this circus drags on all night." My palms were slick as I reached for the hood latch. It clicked open with a metallic sigh, and slowly I lifted it like I was unveiling a magic trick. The engine sat there gleaming, a monument to 2 years of busted knuckles and stubborn nights. Every part polished like it belonged in a museum. "Right there," I said, pointing to the left side of the block. The officers leaned in. Rodriguez squinted, then crouched lower. His partner pulled out a flashlight, the beam sliding over metal until it landed on what I already knew was there. Etched in careful strokes, weathered but still sharp, were the words, D. Miller, 1995, my dad's name, his handwriting. Along with our old address from before the family moved, Rodriguez leaned back, lips pressed together in a way that screamed, "Well, that's game, set, match." His partner muttered, "That looks permanent." I couldn't help smiling. My dad did that. He built this engine before he passed. That's his mark. Been there for nearly 30 years. Kind of hard to forge a time machine, don't you think? For the first time since she'd stormed across the lawn, Beverly faltered. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her eyes darted from the engine block to the officers, then back to me. Her face flushed a shade of red that clashed horribly with her pastel cardigan. Well, maybe there's been some confusion," she stammered, her voice wobbling like a drunk tightrope walker. "Cars change hands all the time." "It's possible," Rodriguez cut her off with a raised hand. "Ma'am, you claimed you sold this vehicle last week, yet here we have a personal engraving from 1995 tied to the registered owner's family. That doesn't add up." Beverly laughed nervously, but it came out brittle, like glass about to shatter. I'm just saying, sometimes these things get complicated. My client, he told me. Funny, I interrupted, because you rattled off every detail about this car like you'd been memorizing a spec sheet. Gear ratio, exhaust system, even the custom mods I installed last month in my own garage. Care to explain how you knew all that? Her eyes widened, just for a second, before she forced a tight smile. I'm a luxury car broker. It's my business to know details. Yeah, except most brokers don't know what kind of muffler a guy installs on a random Tuesday. I shot back. Rodriguez's partner straightened up, jotting notes. His eyes narrowed as he studied Beverly, the way you study a magician when you realize there's a second deck of cards hidden in their sleeve. Ma'am, Rodriguez said, his tone firmer now, where exactly did this bill of sale come from? And who is this Robert Mitchell? Beverly clutched her papers tighter, like they might melt if she let go. He's a client from Nevada. We do business often. Rodriguez arched a brow. Do you have contact information for him? A phone number? Email? Anything we can verify? Beverly hesitated. That tiny pause spoke louder than her shrillest scream. The crowd of neighbors had gone quiet too, their phones still recording, but their whispers replaced by the delicious silence of gossip brewing. I crossed my arms and let the moment hang. For once, I didn't need to say anything. The car, the engraving, my father's steady hand, from decades ago, they were all speaking louder than I ever could. Rodriguez snapped his notebook shut. Ma'am, until you provide verifiable details about this alleged transaction, this appears to be Mr. Miller's vehicle. And frankly, I've got concerns about the accuracy of your statements. Beverly's shoulders sagged, and for the first time, she looked small. But behind her embarrassment, I caught something sharper, almost like panic. Because this wasn't just a neighborly spat anymore. She'd come armed with forged paperwork, uncanny knowledge of my car, and maybe even a drone in the sky backing her up. This wasn't about enforcing HOA rules or getting under my skin. No, this smelled like something bigger. And Beverly Lang wasn't just an entitled HOA president with too much time on her hands. She was a player in a game I hadn't realized I was in until the cops showed up on my driveway. Rodriguez's partner shut his notebook with a snap that sounded like a gavel. For a second, nobody moved. The crowd of neighbors pressed in closer, the murmurs turning into a low buzz, like a beehive ready to swarm. Beverly stood in the middle of my driveway, clutching her so-called bill of sale like it was a holy relic. Her face frozen in a half-smile that was trying very hard not to tremble. You could almost see her brain spinning, scrambling for the next lie to throw out. But the thing about lies is, once they're cracked open, they stink fast, ma'am, Rodriguez said, his voice steady. I'm going to need you to come down to the station and provide a full statement. We'll want to verify the authenticity of these documents and speak with this alleged buyer, Robert Mitchell. The color drained from Beverly's cheeks, leaving her the pale shade of someone who just realized their karaoke performance went viral for all the wrong reasons. This is a mistake, she stammered. You don't understand. I was only trying to protect my client's interests, ma'am, Rodriguez interrupted. You accused your neighbor of auto theft, produced questionable documents, and interfered with a lawful owner in possession of his vehicle. I think we understand perfectly. That's when the dam broke. Beverly's voice pitched up an octave, shrill enough to make the younger kids in the crowd wince. You can't do this to me. I am the HOA president. I run this neighborhood. I know my rights. She pointed at me with a trembling finger, like she was trying to turn me into dust with sheer willpower. He's the criminal here. He's running a business out of his garage. He doesn't belong here. This whole street will go down in value because of him. It was like watching a balloon unravel in slow motion. All that hot air finally leaking out in front of the people she'd spent years bossing around. You could see it in their faces. Neighbors who'd lived under her constant rule of petty citations and passive-aggressive notices about trash cans and garden gnomes. This was their Super Bowl, and Beverly was fumbling at the 1-yard line. Rodriguez motioned to his partner. Let's go, ma'am. The taller officer stepped forward and gently but firmly took Beverly by the arm. She tried to jerk away, but her heels weren't made for tug-of-war. The sight of her being guided toward the cruiser was like a crack of thunder across the block. Phones shot up, cameras rolled, and I swear someone across the street actually started slow-clapping. Beverly twisted back toward me one last time, her eyes blazing with a mix of fury and desperation. "This isn't over, Miller. You hear me? You'll regret this." But it was over. She knew it. The cops knew it. And most importantly, my neighbors knew it. When the cruiser door shut and the siren lights flickered to life, I felt the knot in my stomach finally loosen. It wasn't victory exactly, it was relief, like coming up for air after you've been holding your breath too long. Still, the irony wasn't lost on me. Beverly had tried to seize my father's car with forged papers, and now she was the one getting escorted away with the whole neighborhood watching. If Karma were a TV show, this would have been the season finale cliffhanger. The crowd lingered, for a bit, buzzing like a schoolyard after a fight. A few neighbors even came up to me, people who'd barely said more than hello in passing before, just to pat my shoulder or mutter things like, "About time someone stood up to her," and "That's a fine-looking Shelby you've got there." One kid asked if he could take a selfie with Eleanor, and honestly, after the day I'd had, I didn't have the heart to say no. But as the garage door creaked shut again and the crowd trickled away, the adrenaline wore off and the unease crept. Back in Beverly wasn't just nosy. She hadn't just pulled a random accusation out of thin air. She had paperwork ready, details memorized, even a drone hovering over my backyard like some eye in the sky. That wasn't neighborhood pettiness. That was strategy, and strategy meant planning. Planning meant people. People who might not be as loud as Beverly, but were definitely more dangerous. I leaned against Eleanor's fender, running my fingers along the smooth curve of the metal. My father had carved his name into that engine block almost 30 years ago, like he knew one day it might need to speak for him. That mark saved me today. But if Beverly had ties to something bigger, an auto theft ring, maybe what would save me tomorrow? I could almost hear Dad's gravelly laugh in my head. Paranoia keeps you alive, kid. And maybe he was right. Maybe it wasn't paranoia anymore, because now, every time I imagined the whir of that drone, I wondered who else was watching still. For tonight, Eleanor sat safely in the driveway, her paint catching the last light of the setting sun. The chrome gleamed, almost smug, like she knew she'd just survived her closest brush with being stolen. She wasn't just a car. She was a legacy. A conversation with my father that hadn't ended, not even after all these years. I locked up the garage with a little more care than usual, double-checking the bolts, triple-checking the alarm. The neighbors would gossip. The cops would dig into Beverly's documents. And maybe, just maybe, the truth about her little side hustle would come crawling into the light. But I wasn't counting on the system to protect me. Not anymore. From now on, vigilance wasn't optional. It was survival. As the street quieted and porch lights flickered on, I stood for a long moment just staring at Eleanor. Her engine had roared back to life after decades of silence. She was mine, and she always had been. And if anyone else wanted to test that fact again, well, let's just say they'd better be ready for more than an engraving under the hood. Because this wasn't just about horsepower or shiny chrome. It was about family, about legacy, about finishing what my dad started and making sure no one, not Beverly, not some phantom buyer from Nevada, not even an organized ring of thieves would ever take it away. And as the night closed in, I realized something simple but true. The car wasn't the only thing shining in that driveway. So was the victory. So was the memory. And somewhere, if there's any justice in the universe, so was my dad's grin.